Okay, Munya, why don't you take about 30 to 45 seconds, give a very brief introduction to our ambassador, and then I will finish up, and we want to give as much time for the ambassador as possible. But Munya is from Zimbabwe and actually was a neighbor of the ambassador back in Harare. So Munya, welcome.
Good day. Thank you, fellow Rotarians. It is my pleasure and single honor to say something that we normally do. It starts from a single thing, just like water. I bought a property in one of the posh suburbs of Glen Forest, where the ambassador resides. Then I moved to the property and I didn't have potable water. My family went to his house and they were given drinking water. So it is my wife and his wife that made the connection of us, the two. And by then, he was the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Regional Integration and Foreign Service. With that, it started in Zimbabwe. Little did I know that one day I will introduce the ambassador to the world, to the Rotary, and I hand it over back to you, Dr. Sam. Thank you.
Munya, thank you very much. And I found Munya in front of the University Club one day and asked him if he was lost. And he says, I'm looking for the Rotary Club. And I said, you come along with me. And by the way, we'll sign you up as a member. And so he's been an active member ever since. And Munya, thank you for being here and introducing me and us to our esteemed ambassador. This is Thaddeus Ted Chifamba, that he was sent here specifically by the president of the country, who was newly elected at the time, and said, go there and do good. And he was charged with 7 different areas of what we're calling the whole of country development for Zimbabwe. And we've been very actively working with him by nonprofit, Emerald Planet International Foundation, to identify best practices that could be used there, and looking at the vast resource base that Zimbabwe has, and how can Zimbabwe, instead of being beholden to the international community for loans, to be able to enhance and expand its own development out of its natural resource base, and the fact that it has a very highly educated population and want to be engaged in the future of Zimbabwe as maybe one of those 5 shining stars among nations of the 54 countries on the African continent. And I want to say that His Excellency is a great communicator. He has a real love for his country, for the African continent, but also the work that he's doing here in the United States, having been brought over specifically by his president from the European Union, which he had a long-term assignment there, but he was literally called to Washington, D.C. So he's here at a sense of love for the United States, but also out of a sense of duty to his nation. And so there's a group of about 6 of us that are helping him as far as developing projects and maybe even model programs for that country. So, Mr. Ambassador, we're really pleased you're going to be here.
Well, thanks a lot, Dr. Lee. It is for me an honor to be able to address a group of highly principled, disciplined, altruistic, and philanthropic global citizens. As a new person in DC, I should confess that I was really humbled by my personal and business interactions with some of your members, notably Dr. Samuel Lee Hancock and Munyaradzi Tichawana, to mention just a few. They literally held me by the hand and introduced me to some very useful contacts and networks, even leading to this interaction. I believe that this marks the beginning of my journey as a Rotarian. I noticed that we have been joined by quite a number of Rotarians from Zimbabwe. I hope that after the end of my tour of duty, even where I appear tired, that Rotarians in Harare and in Zimbabwe will continue to encourage me to continue on this journey. Ladies and gentlemen, Zimbabwe is a beautiful country in Southern Africa, which borders Zambia to the north, Botswana to the west, Mozambique to the east, and South Africa to the south. It gained independence on the 18th of April, 1980, and the US was the first country to establish diplomatic relations with Zimbabwe on our Independence Day. Some of the quick statistics about my country: our population is plus or minus 16 million. We're expecting that another census will be conducted during the course of next year. We do have quite a sizable number of Zimbabweans in the diaspora and who are occupying some very strategic positions within the host countries and host communities. The size of my country is about 242,700 square miles, and GDP projected to be 22 billion at the end of 2021. Our greatest asset is our people. They are very warm, polite, literate, industrious, and resilient. Since independence, government has invested a lot into the social sectors like education, health, arts, and culture. Zimbabwe has a university in every province, and in accordance with the implementation of our devolution policy, each of those universities is supposed to look into the research, innovation, and development needs of the various provinces. There is scope for further cooperation between Zimbabwe and the US through the implementation of student exchange programs and twinning of universities. In the area of health, Zimbabwe has a referral hospital in every province and a clinic in every ward. However, the challenge is on the availability of adequate drugs and advanced medical equipment. Yet, despite these challenges, Zimbabwe is a leader in pandemic control on the African continent, as shown by her quick initiatives to fight HIV and AIDS, as well as the current COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, our vaccination rollout program is amongst the best on the continent. Allow me to thank the Rotarians for your support in fighting polio and malaria. Such partnerships are critical in saving lives and creating adequate and effective health systems. Zimbabwe boasts of a good climate, amazing flora and fauna, rich tourist attractions such as the mighty Victoria Falls, the Great Zimbabwe Monuments, mana pools, etc. Like many other countries, Zimbabwe is vulnerable to climate change, which has resulted in recurring droughts and floods, and even a new phenomena of cyclones, which we did not know in Southern Africa. Zimbabwe is seeking meaningful partnerships to combat climate change and is happy with the return of the US to the multilateral fora and to take her leadership position within the Climate Change Convention. In response to challenges caused by climate change, Zimbabwe is actively looking for technology to remove toxic emissions from coal, which we use for power generation, cement manufacturing, even for steel manufacturing, we use a lot of coal, but we are trying to see how we can harness technologies that can remove toxic emissions as we burn our coal. Let me take also this opportunity to thank Rotarians for your very kind support every time that Zimbabwe has been faced with a catastrophe like Cyclone Idai, as well as intervening to assist in drought situations. Zimbabwe, together with other countries in Southern Africa, is a leader in sustainable wildlife conservation, and we have thriving iconic species such as Africa's big five, that's the elephant, lions, rhinos, buffaloes, leopards, etc. Unfortunately, instead of being rewarded for successful wildlife conservation, these countries in Southern Africa are being punished as they face growing restrictions in the trade in wildlife products. Currently, within the US here, we are fighting some kind of legislation or proposed legislation that would ban importation of hunted trophies from Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Tanzania. Yet, I want to underline that there is a link between biodiversity loss and climate change, especially where wildlife population growth threatens the habitat. Animal rights groups should be made aware of the sacrifices made by communities that coexist with wildlife. The narrative needs to shift from focusing on hunting as a sport to focusing on community involvement in sustainable wildlife conservation, prevention of biodiversity loss, and the fight against poachers. In Zimbabwe, roughly 700,000 families are directly involved in wildlife conservation, and this translates to about 2 million people. So if we deprive these people from proceeds that come from harvested wildlife, it means that we are affecting or witnessing how the livelihoods of more than 2 million people are being affected. And I think Rotarians should add their voice based on science, not on emotion, to explain to the world that sustainable wildlife conservation and also community development, biodiversity management can actually be sustained through economic harvesting, managed harvesting of wildlife. In a situation where our wildlife is not facing extinction, there is no need for the world to panic. Zimbabweans, together with other countries in Southern Africa, are conserving wildlife not for themselves, but for the world, and they should be rewarded. There are quite a number of investment opportunities in Zimbabwe, with more than 50 different types of minerals, of which about 12 or more are strategic minerals. Zimbabwe's mining sector offers amazing investment opportunities. Zimbabwe is endowed, amongst others, with green energy minerals such as copper, lithium, neodymium, among others. And Zimbabwe is inviting US companies to invest in the supply chain for clean energy minerals. For clean energy minerals, Zimbabwe also has abundant sunshine, which can be used for the production of solar energy. There are equally abundant investment opportunities in the following sectors: agriculture, manufacturing, tourism, ICT, infrastructure development, energy, transport and logistics, etc. Let me just now quickly turn to the bilateral relations between Zimbabwe and the US. Our bilateral relations are currently limited to a narrow range of issues, namely democracy, elections, and human rights. Of course, you might also add in humanitarian support. Zimbabwe currently is under US sanctions, which is ZEDERA, and these sanctions were imposed in 2002. We strongly believe that the US foreign policy on Zimbabwe was to a large extent influenced by the United Kingdom. My own view and the view of my government is that there is need for a total review of the US Africa policy especially in the face of competition for accessing Africa's resources from China in particular and the BRICS in general. In fact, I'm happy that the current US administration is actually reviewing its Africa policy and has undertaken to reset its relationship with Africa on the basis of mutual respect in order to build back better. My mission here in the United States as Zimbabwean ambassador is to broaden the agenda of cooperation to include other issues of mutual interest and concerns, such as trade and investment, the issue of rare earth elements, climate change, fight against terrorism, and so many other issues. In other words, I am saying that the addition of these or the broadening of the agenda is not at the expense of issues that deal with democracy, human rights, and governance. But we are saying that this is in addition. We want a broader kind of agenda so that we can engage in broad-based dialogue, managed dialogue between the United States and Zimbabwe. In fact, like I said, the ZEDERA was imposed in 2002 on allegations of human rights violations, as well as issues to do with elections. But issues of elections, democracy, and human rights should not lead to acrimony, but they should be the basis of our cooperation if we are friends. There are no saints in this game. There is a lot we can learn from each other. At 41 years, Zimbabwe is facing the same challenges that a centuries-old mature democracy is facing today. And that's the issue of a disputed election. We need resilient democratic institutions to be able to manage situations where the conduct and outcome of elections is challenged by the contestants. I think also in the case of the US, the murder of George Floyd and the resultant backlash unearthed some US systemic weaknesses, in the area of human rights. Of course, January 6th is a very, very sad reminder of also some of the weaknesses in terms of the democratic experiment. Under the new dispensation in Zimbabwe, President E.D. Mnangagwa has implemented political and economic reforms that aim to address economic fundamentals as well as freeing the political space. The 2018 election was very transparent and internationally observed. Though not entirely perfect, it was a vast improvement, and some even say the best election that we have held since 1980. However, there is need for all political players to respect the democratic processes, procedures, and institutions, and to accept outcomes and be prepared to move on to implement reforms and to strive to do better at the next round of elections. So I think that against this background of ongoing reforms, we are beginning to hear some positive voices from the State Department and the Department of Commerce, who are saying that American companies can now engage in business with non-sanctioned Zimbabwean companies. I am cautiously optimistic that ZEDERA will be lifted during my tour of duty. Ladies and gentlemen, sanctions are a blunt instrument that affect the generality of the population more than the targeted individuals. I am encouraged by various sanctions policy reviews currently being undertaken at the level of the United Nations, as well as at the level of the US Congress. You may be aware that recently the UN rapporteur on unilateral coercive measures visited Zimbabwe and concluded that sanctions had brought misery to the Zimbabwean people and should be removed. I'm appealing to the Rotary Club of Washington, D.C., and to all Rotarians worldwide to add your voices in opposing the continuation of sanctions on Zimbabwe and on any other country for that matter. Finally, let me just highlight that I am receiving a lot of business inquiries from US companies and Zimbabweans in the diaspora. Some of the projects under very active consideration currently relate to the setting up of a multimodal transport and logistics hub at Kanyemba, that's in Northeast Zimbabwe, construction of heavy duty road and rail infrastructure, the desire to grow medicinal cannabis, and also to undertake climate-friendly mining, also some project inquiries on waste management, on alternative uses of coal, on establishment of rain gardens, etc. And as I said, most of the projects that I am trying to focus on are really intended to contribute towards combating climate change, among others. So against the background of this introduction, where we are saying Zimbabwe is a well endowed country in terms of its human capital, in terms of the natural resources, as well as in terms of peace. One then begins to wonder whether Zimbabwe's future should be dependent or should continue to depend on aid. My approach is to say that no. Whilst we might need a lot of assistance now to capacitate communities and to capacitate the national economy, the future of Zimbabwe should not be dependent on aid, but on mutually beneficial partnerships. And I am extending a hand of invitation to Rotarians the world over, in your own rights as business persons, as entrepreneurs, to look seriously at Zimbabwe as an investment destination. And I look forward to continuous engagement with you. I look forward to benefiting from the rich network of Rotarians to see how we can make this world a better place to live in. I thank you.
Thank you so much for your remarks, Ambassador. And you know, I was really interested by your thoughts about climate change and how it's affecting your country. And we've just finished COP26. And I'm wondering how, from Zimbabwe's perspective, how did that meeting go? What were things that were good that came out of it? And what were things that you would have liked to have seen different or that remained to be done? So maybe we could start there. And then I have some other questions in the queue.
Well, thank you for the question. COP26 was obviously a very welcome opportunity. Among others, it was an opportunity for my president to go to the United Kingdom after a very, very long period because of the strained relationships between Zimbabwe and the UK. So to us, that was a very positive gesture. Of course, the invitation was not a bilateral one because there was a UN conference. We appreciate that, but it was an opportunity for Zimbabwe to interact at the highest level with global leaders in addressing the issue of climate change. Like many developing countries, we think that there should be more commitment, especially in terms of availing climate financing to combat climate change. If you recall, huge figures, more than $100 billion were supposed to be mobilized annually if the world is supposed to make a difference. But obviously, we are not there. We are very far from it. And then there is also the issue about who should do what. You know, as most developing countries, we are not really the major polluters. but then there is always a push to force us to do a lot more than what we are capable of doing. So we were urging that there should be greater cooperation and understanding as we fight climate change. Soon after COP26, and as our delegations went back to Zim, the biggest debate now emerging is how can we ensure greater community involvement, especially in the implementation of our nationally determined contributions. And I was giving you the example, for instance, about wildlife conservation and biodiversity management, to say communities are already involved. Let us see how we can empower them, how we can further capacitate them so that they are also playing their part in maintaining the carbon sinks, you know, and in maintaining biodiversity. And as I said, in the area of wildlife conservation, unfortunately, the focus is so much on the hunter, you know, maybe standing with his big gun behind some iconic species. And we are saying, well, whilst that has been okay, I mean, for some time as a way of communication, but that picture does not bring to the fore the communities who are living side by side with the wildlife and who are helping to manage the wildlife. So we are saying the narrative should shift from the hunting to conservation. And if we get into that space, we'll begin to identify the communities, the need for their capacitation, and the need for their involvement, you know, in combating climate change. I've also given other examples. I mean, we are richly endowed with minerals. One of the biggest polluters has been identified as coal, especially in the production of electricity, steel, and cement. And we are saying, how can we reduce toxic emissions from burning coal? But going even further, because we are sitting on a coal reserve of more than 200 years, I mean, to come. And we are saying, can we develop alternative uses for coal? You know, and I'm happy to say that by working with some companies that I was introduced to by some of the Rotarians currently on this platform, we are exploring how we can convert coal to fertilizer and coal to water purification chemicals. You know, all these should benefit not only Zimbabwe, but it should benefit the world, especially if we manage to reduce our emissions. So COP26 was a success to some extent. Our levels of ambition were much higher, but we came back, I mean, fairly confident that we are now on a new path, especially with the return of the US to the multilateral fora addressing the issue of climate change.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Really, I appreciate it. It was very informative information, wonderful. I'm very happy that with the basically mineral that you have in Zimbabwe and mainly lithium. And I already, just while you were talking, I sent an email to some basically authority in regard of purchasing or contracting with importing lithium from Zimbabwe to United States. United States need lithium a lot, and right now that this source of lithium that we get from other countries, it's really in a certain conflict. And if you give the permission, I ask that the people, they contact you for you know, some contract for lithium.
Yes, we have quite a number of lithium assets. And like I said, Zimbabwe is highly mineralized, and there are many other minerals that can be used for the production of green energy. So I'll be very happy to receive your inquiries, whether it's a trade or it's an investment inquiry. What I had hoped to achieve a lot more is to see more American companies coming to invest, and be involved in the supply chains for the production of green energy. At one stage, we thought that America was the leader, especially after the successful launch of this Tesla car. But more and more, we are beginning to see that America would have to be dependent on others, for the sourcing of the raw materials that you need for the production of batteries. And, and I think that my advice would be that America should be a lot more actively involved in Africa, and also even in Zimbabwe. As a diplomat, I know that America does really not have an Africa policy, and perhaps this is why the Biden administration is very keen to see how America can position itself on dealing with Africa. I think, except for your interest in hydrocarbons, after the discovery of oil in the Gulf of Guinea, Africa was really not on the radar for America. And now you're beginning to wake up to competition from China, as China is grabbing or accessing some of the choice assets, to in these supply chains. And we are saying that America should also feel free, wake up to the party, smell the coffee, and come and actively participate, in the mining as well as in the value addition on the African continent. I thank you, but you are very welcome.
Ambassador, before I present my question, Uncle Sam and I have a surprise for you. My dear friend Kundai Chifamba is on the call with us. I told him that I was going to be in a meeting with his dad and he should come and listen to his dad so that he can tell you how the meeting went.
I told Martin,
question...
Mr. Ambassador, that we need to have that as a surprise for you, that your son would show up and be a part of the audience today. So I was going to let Martin do the announcement, and he did it.
Sorry, my network could be a bit bad. I'm actually in a taxi back from, I'm on a business trip in South Africa, so I'm driving back from Pretoria to Sandton now. So I was able to catch bits and pieces, especially around like carbons and the recent meeting that took place in Glasgow. And I think it's a very important thing for us as young Zimbabweans and Africans it's an important thing for us to follow up on. So recently our chairman, I work at CBZ, his name's Mark Holtzman, was talking to us about it. And we thought, he's crazy. Carbon credits in Africa, it's a very foreign concept. But what's important, it's on its way to becoming $1 billion, if not $1 trillion industry. And I didn't understand it, but think of this whole carbon emissions and everything the same way you really think about COVID. So just if someone is reckless in Shanghai, there is a likelihood that variant or that thing could then have an impact in Harare, and with carbons, it's not that just because you're burning down or cutting down trees in Harare, that impact is felt in London. So when we have Cyclone Idai in Harare or in Chipinge, it's not necessarily based on what has happened in Zimbabwe, but it's got far-reaching consequences because it could be actions of what other people have done in as far out as China, or America, and North Europe, or whatever it is the case. And there's huge opportunities, there's now a chance to make money by doing good. So you can make money planting trees, building solar farms, and it becomes more important now to think about the environment. I'm fortunate. I think I'll have a kid in 5 or 6 months, and that's actually made me realize that if I don't look after the current environment that I'm in, my child will suffer. And especially in a country like Zimbabwe, where our livelihood, because we're an agrarian economy, is built off and around rain. But the lack of rain is also a function of how we are treating the environment. So there's a direct correlation with where we want to be in the next 10 or 15 years. So that's the part I caught. I'm sorry, I've just been stuck in meetings, but it's always great to hear people listening to a man that I always argue with my father. He's been telling me Zimbabwe's on the mend for the last 20 years. So I always laugh when people take time out of their day to listen to them, because I mean, I argue with them and I think I'm right most of the time. So I think if you've got any key takeaway, listen to me more. I think you'll be much better equipped than you will.
Yeah, Kundai, thank you for being with us. And Martin, thank you for bringing the ambassador's son. And also I want to mention through our Trees for the Capital is morphing, Mr. Ambassador, as you know, to Trees for the World. And I believe that Brian Ingram may be still on here, but he's working with the Rotary Club of Manila and our committee to plant about 150,000 acres, of trees in Mindanao in southern Philippines. And I was thinking about this in the context of your beautiful country and the opportunities for what they're now calling green credits, which is really the carbon credits. And that's a very real thing. And as your son was saying, it's very real investments that could be brought in to address severe climate change, as well as the rain gardens that you and I have talked about directly. So thank you very much. Are there any other questions that anyone has?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
It was lovely to hear your talk, and very nice to meet you, Ambassador. And I was wondering, what is the main language in Zimbabwe, and how does that play into access to education and to knowledge?
The main language which is spoken across is unfortunately a foreign language called English. But then we have a lot of local languages as well, and the main one is Shona, you know, and then also we have Ndebele, which is close to Zulu. Those are the main ones, and of course we have some smaller languages. I think more than 13 or so. But in terms of education, the main best language obviously being English, and then we are now trying to introduce the other smaller languages, you know, especially in primary education, so that a person is not only learning Shona or Ndebele, but they can also learn other languages. Whenever a document has been produced, it can be like our constitution and many other documents. An attempt is made to translate it into all languages in Zimbabwe, and so is the same being encouraged even in parliamentary debates, that at times we have to use local languages for better expression. So, and as I said, Zimbabwe in Africa, and in terms of literacy, we are in the top 3. We have a very robust education system, but of course it needs to be supported both by government and by our partners.
Just a follow-up question. What is the sort of, how much access to I guess, to cellular devices does the country have, and how does you know, what percentage do you think the country has cellular devices?
That has grown phenomenally. I think we should be above or close to 90%.
Wow.
Yeah. So in terms of penetration of mobile telephones, it's moving so fast that our Minister of Finance recently, in the budget that he announced only last week, was actually tempted to come up to introduce a new tax, you know, and trying to harness revenue from, especially when you register a new device, that you have to pay something like $50 US dollars. So if a Minister of Finance can identify the procurement of mobile telephones as a huge thing and a potential revenue source, it means that the growth of penetration is phenomenal. Of course, I mean, some parliamentarians are waiting for him with stones to say, hey, that is too much. But obviously, when we are talking about domestic resource mobilization, we have to be as innovative as possible, especially during these times when we need to mobilize a lot of resources to fight COVID and other ills.
Andres, I just want to throw in here, if you look at the African continent, roughly 60% of the population is under 35, 60% under 35.
Wow.
They grew by 550 million people in 5 years on the continent. So they went from 850 million to almost 3 billion now on the continent. And now they're saying in virtually all 54 nations on the African continent, virtually every house and hut has at least one cell phone, at least one. And so in many ways and because the iPhone penetration, some ways they're better connected than we are in the United States, particularly in our urban and very rural areas. We have about 48 million people that do not have access to even to the internet in the United States.
Wow.
And so Africa is, we have a program called Africa Fast Forward and the Emerald Planet. It really is. We have someone here, Mr. Ambassador from Pakistan. She's an outstanding Rotarian, Paul Harris Fellow. And so Sim, I'm going to let you go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you so much, Sam. Greetings from Pakistan, Mr. Ambassador. I just want to ask that all the citizens of Pakistan who are planning to visit Zimbabwe, I have to apply for a visa through online mode only, like e-visa. But Zimbabwe does not allow the visa on arrival facility to the citizens of Pakistan. May I ask why?
Well, we, as a country, we do have an online visa application system. And this is the first time that I'm hearing that the visa then is not accepted on arrival. If I could get more information, I could ensure that this issue is addressed. You may want also to contact our embassy in Delhi, since that will be the nearest to you, to get to understand as to why there are such challenges, and perhaps they can assist you directly with the application.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Uncle Sam, if I may, what I wanted to ask the ambassador is how best can we work with your office, United States of America, and Rotary clubs in Zimbabwe can have more humanitarian impact in Zimbabwe? And before you answer my question, I would like to invite you to the Rotary details with Kondai. He'll share them with you. So whenever you're back home or even on Zoom, when you can log in, you're welcome to visit our Rotary club.
Well, thanks a lot, Martin. Feel free to send me an invitation and even a link to some of the meetings for the Harare Rotary Club. Regarding your question as to how we can work together, well, Dr. Sam and others, Rotary Club of Washington, D.C. has created that link. So please feel free. I mean, you can talk to me directly on any issue, or even talk to Dr. Sam and other Rotarians who are out here about issues that you would want addressed. But I can tell you for sure that since I've been accorded the honor of interacting with Rotarians, as well as the honorary membership, I will definitely work closely and under the guidance of Zimbabweans who are Rotarians here to see how we can identify projects which need to be attended to in Zimbabwe. I'm happy that when we started this meeting, there was a briefing about the global grants, and it's something that I'll be following up very closely to see how we can benefit communities back home.
And Martin, that's as we discussed several weeks ago when I spoke to your Rotary Club about the International Global Grants Projects Fair. It's once a month, third Tuesday of every month from 8 p.m. till roughly 11 p.m. U.S. Eastern Standard Time or U.S. Daylight Time. And so we'll be happy to work with you or your club. And also we need to announce to our Rotary members here in Washington, D.C., there are 30 active Rotary clubs in Zimbabwe, and there's 61 active Rotary clubs in that district. So Rotary is a big force and big movement, both in Zimbabwe and that eastern, mostly Anglophone area of Africa, although you do have Mozambique, which is Portuguese speaking. But Rotary is just absolutely zooming, no pun intended, on the African continent, and the number of new members coming in is almost exponential.
In fact, when I traveled to Southern Africa recently, I had gone for an Africa Wildlife Consultative Forum. Just to give you an example of something that you should also keep on the radar, because what we were discussing there is trans-frontier conservation. And here we were talking about 5 countries or so working together to manage their wildlife resource and to create open corridors for the wildlife to move from one country to the other.
Yeah.
And I think this is very much promotive of peace, understanding, conservation, and something that you might want to include or to put on your radar in the context of the ICC.
Yeah, we're doing something similar. I'm on the board with Bill Dent, who is our current president. And we're actually doing the same thing for the monarch butterfly, opening corridors from Newfoundland all the way into Michoacan, which is in central Mexico, and everything in between. So reconnecting what I guess you affectionately call them lily pads, but to get these lily pads to expand to be a true corridor, as you're talking about, Mr. Ambassador.
Your Excellency, it's been a pleasure listening to your presentation. And I've learned a lot, especially about the conservation. Myself from Zimbabwe, I'm happy to learn that we need to change the narrative, as you said, from hunting to conservation. But thank you, Ambassador, for your time.
Thank you, and enjoy Zim. When are you coming back?
Yeah, she's actually there, Mr. Ambassador. She just recently returned to Zimbabwe, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, but I have fond memories of DC. Thank you.
Okay.
I look forward to visiting again.
You're always welcome.
It's just a quick hello to my fellow Zimbabweans. I'm a new member of Rotary here in DC, and I look forward to working with you on a number of projects. I see Jackie's there, so if any of you need to get hold of me, Jackie knows how. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for a very informative and interesting conversation. We have a habit of planting a tree to your conservation interest for each of our speakers, and we will do so for you. And now we do that with the U.S. Park Service, and we will have the GPS coordinates of your tree. So as soon as it gets planted, we will let you know, and you can even visit your tree and you'll be invited to visit the planting, which we would love to have you. Secondly, we would like to offer you an honorary membership in our club. We will send you a written invitation, but we would love for you to accept the honorary membership.
And I also want to thank you for the bestowing an honorary membership on me, to join the Rotary Club of Washington, D.C. As I said, I'm hoping that this encounter marks the beginning of my own journey as a Rotarian. And I was appealing to my fellow Zimbabwean Rotarians to continue to encourage me even beyond the completion of my tour of duty when I go back to Zimbabwe, so that I'll continue to be a very active member of the Rotary Club.